here. So we are on the stream. Well, as soon as it catches up, we'll be on. James is craving that Tome sauce.
Yeah. I'm not sure what Tome sauce is.
No. No. That sounds... No. What did I just get myself into? What kind of... No. Secret sauce? No.
I don't know what Tome sauce is either. Hi, everybody. All right. Well, so we talked a little bit about how this will all go. We've been doing our pre-recording chat for those of you in the stream, and getting things ready to go. It just occurred to me I should probably open the software I use to record the audio. That would be useful.
Oh, that might help.
Hey, yes. Brian Cortijo's with us too. Hey, Brian. I haven't seen Brian in a few years. I miss him.
I can't see anything else because I shut everything down to make sure that Skype didn't freak out on me again. So I can't look at the chat. I can't have anything else. It's just you and to you and me, and hopefully nothing else goes wrong.
Hopefully, James did not
disrespect. Fine. James Intercaso is he's horrified that we responded so poorly to his comments.
Tome sauce.
About sauce?
Special sauce, yes.
Listen there into the universe. He should not be horrified at all. He should know what he's getting into. This is a man who ran the demon plague for me, so it's not like he doesn't know what's going on.
He just plays innocent sometimes. All right, should we go ahead and get started then? All right.
Sure.
You will discover quickly that I tweeted earlier my script, right? It's just sort of a legal pad, and I've got some bullet points on it. So this is the show that I don't do a lot of heavy scripting on. So we just sort of fly by the seat of our pants and see how it goes. All right, so there you go.
I like pants flying.
Let me hit record on the audio. All right, that is going. All right, so this is February 2020. This is Behind the DM Screen. We are 3 DMs talking about our games and helping each other out, and I think that's more or less the intro. You may notice a few oddities in this episode, and let's call it upgrades. We got a few upgrades in this episode. We have our usual me, and we also have our usual Sam over there with us. Say hi, Sam.
Hi, everyone doing?
He's waving for the stream, but the people listening to the podcast can't hear the wave, Sam. So
I said hello.
Eventually. No, I can hear you.
Can you not hear me now?
But we do not have the usual mic with us. Instead, we have upgraded to bring Lauren in with us. So say hi, Lauren.
Hi, Lauren. How you doing? I'm watching us on the Twitch.
Yeah, you're going to fit in really well here. Hi, Lauren. Good.
Just saying hi, Sam, and then Lauren said hi, Lauren.
Listen, I was so close to saying that I was actually Mike Shea and seeing if anybody would notice.
And so, and as Lauren noted, we have been, for the last few months, we've started streaming our recordings. So if you wanted to join us there, you're welcome to do so. Usually the next day or that night, it gets uploaded to the YouTube channel. And then, of course, whenever Sam gets caught up on editing, it'll be posted in audio and cleaned up and make us sound all pretty. So that's more or less the routine these days. Lauren? Oh.
Also, big props to doing the audio editing as someone who has to do that on a regular basis.
I spent the last 7 years going through grad school, and if Sam hadn't taken over the audio editing, I think the Tome Show probably would have died while I was earning a PhD. So,
absolutely fair. Dude, audio editing is
a bear.
Rough.
Yeah, no, it used to. I always estimate however many, for every minute of audio somebody hears, I spent at least 3 minutes working with it. Between recording and uploading and editing, yeah. So there you go.
Absolutely.
So before we go too far, since people may not know you as well, Lauren, why don't you tell everybody on listening here who you are and all of that? I'm sure all of the people watching on the stream know who you are because they came here to see you, right? That's why they showed up. But for all the millions listening on the audio, let them know a little bit about who Lauren is.
Lauren Urban. I am the community manager for D&D Beyond, and I guess the DMing credentials. I'm the DM for a podcast called Dungeon Drunks, which has been ongoing for a couple of years now. We are literally about to launch episode 2, so that's been going on for a little while. I've also been a DM for a variety of shows on the Wizards of the Coast channel. I did Clerical Error and Destiny and Doom for them, a player on a bunch of random shows. Most notably, I am the Dragonborn cleric or Garrett Eldrex on Beyond Heroes, which we just played before I came here. And when I'm not doing all the D&D stuff, I am a professional classical musician, which is why you might hear people refer to me as oboe, as that is my nickname. So there is my short list of things that I do that you might maybe know me from, but if not,
I
that's
assume
okay.
that the oboe then is your instrument of choice.
It is sadly the thing that I picked before I knew anybody.
My wife was an oboe player through college anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, through most of college. She also got heavily into marching band, and oddly enough, they don't have a lot of marching oboes. So she picked up the tuba for marching band because that's the natural equivalent to the oboe, right? So, yeah.
It is kind of the exact opposite, and I kind of
oh no, I mean, it was brilliant.
That's
There's not
amazing.
a lot of female tubas in marching band in college, right? And that's actually how I ended up meeting her. My roommate in the dorms was a tuba player, and that's how I met her. So, all right, it worked out real
tuba
well.
is awesome. I respect her for fleeing from the oboe when she could.
She still went back to it for concert band, but she hasn't played since we graduated entirely too long ago. So, all right. So we're gonna get into our discussion of our games, and we're gonna start with Sam. So, Sam, I am going to put 15 minutes on the clock for you to ignore. So your time starts now. I can hold up the time.
Okay. Well, I also want to say out loud what I just typed in chat, which is only something I did not know, which is that Jeff's wife is a badass.
No, I've always known it.
Because I know. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. Okay, so I think the last thing that I talked about with my game was describing how... Well, so I've got 2 games going. I have a game that I run on the D&D Brief stream / podcast, which is so kindly hosted by James Intercaso on the Don't Split the podcast. And so that has a couple of episodes in the can that have not been released. So I'm not going to say much about that, but I want to talk about my other game because it's a campaign that I run with 2 young boys. And I've been running through Mike Shea's Ruins of the Grendel Route. And I think the last time we talked, I mentioned they got down to the Grendel Route. They couldn't figure out how to really resolve the issue. Of course, spoilers, by the way, for anybody who might think about playing that later. But
is it even,
they got down there
out yet?
And
the final version.
Oh yeah,
okay.
it's out. Yeah, look. Oh, see now I have to Shay, and I
well,
have
we don't need to give Mike too
Right,
many
this is,
promotions here. He chose not to be on the episode, so.
And now we're required to permit, right?
Yeah,
That's
right.
I have all of my Sly Flourish stuff right over here. Hold on, I'll go get it.
Look, I signed the contract. So anyway, so there's this part at the end. They couldn't figure out what to do with it, and they sort of halfway resolved. Since we don't have this in front of us in a way that we can figure, must be somewhere else in the dungeon. So they started going around and looking around through the last sort of little mini dungeon again, and they found this spot that they had been to before, but they had never really messed around in that room, and that room had a sort of a sigil infused into the floor, and they had previously, but this time they decided that they were going to sit in the sigil and pray or meditate or think about, what might be the solution to this problem, and it ended up teleporting them away. So the mountain is crumbling because they didn't actually resolve the issue, and they've teleported away. But what had happened previously was they had convinced the council members that were leading the town, the Deep Delvers Enclave, that they needed to evacuate everyone and they needed to leave as soon as possible. And they had this amazing role play, gathered together, and they got a person who's really important in the town, one of the NPCs, to come with them and help them convince the rest of the people that they need to leave their homes and pack up what little things they could and leave immediately so that they didn't all get killed. And so that's what they had done, which was just an amazing scene for a 13 and a 15-year-old kid, who they've never played D&D before. It was amazing. It was so awesome. And so I gave them a lot of leeway when they decided, okay, they're not actually going to leave. They're going to go back and they're going to try to defeat the Grindel Root. And they recruited 3 of these wizards that lived in the Enclave, and a couple of other adventurers. And they went down there, and then everybody them because they kept almost accidentally setting up the NPC, having them go take care of these really nasty, combat issues, and they survived somehow. So then at the end, they ended up teleporting away, and that was the end of the previous session. Well, then they wanted one. They didn't want it to be over. I was thinking, because they had sort of given me hints and I had talked to them about it, I thought when they finished that, they were done. They just wanted to leave the mountain and go either play other characters or go do something else. But one of the NPCs that they had taken with them, they had really taken a liking to, and she was actually alive, and she had been sort of what do you call it? The Grindel Root had influenced her. She was almost kind of possessed a little bit, and they decided, we can't just leave her. We have to go back for her. So they went back for her, but when they went back for her, they camped in this huge forest that's at the base of the mountain. And I rolled a random encounter, and I rolled this bandit troop coming through, and they actually fought their way out of that. Heard something flying in the air toward the mountain, and then they witnessed a mind flayer and a lithid going through the forest and gathering thralls. So they go back to the mountain, and they find this big thing, which they think is a meteor. They're not really sure, and they see that it's damaged the mountain a little down, and they see these creatures that they don't recognize sort of to the mountain, going down a passageway, and then coming back out and taking something into the area. And they figure out it's a ship. They try to question some of these beings, which they don't know what it is. The sort of star spawn from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. But it's like ones, right? So I can't even remember what they're actually called. But they're actually beatable by these characters. These characters are only 5th level, but if they're smart, they're not just going to get completely overwhelmed. And they didn't get completely overwhelmed. But then they decided to sneak onto the ship and try to kill whatever mind flayers are on there, because they realize, the mind flayers are on there. So they go on the ship. I know. They go on the ship, right?
I'm sorry, I just have visceral reactions to mind flayers, especially when you're like, level 5 characters, mind flayers. Oh.
Well, what happened was one of them had gotten caught, and the mind flayer was like for the character's head, and the other PC conjured some giant eagles, because he's a druid, and the giant eagles carried them away. So they escaped from the mind flayer. So they already sort of had this idea that they really just did not like this mind flayer. So they decide to sneak onto this ship, which at that point they really were unsure it's a ship, and then they found out real fast it's a ship. The ship they're going through, they're trying to destroy, they get in the fight with this mind flayer. While they're fighting the mind flayer, which they're doing a really good job of, they peek down a corridor and they see a big great brain in a tank that's being it's being like serviced and getting energy from the pieces of the Grindel roots, okay? And they realize, it's getting the energy from...
They said, like you do.
Right, like you do. Yeah, of course. So they decide they're going to try to break the little tanks that are feeding into the big tank. So they do that. And they're still trying to fight this mind flayer, right? One of them, his brain gets consumed. He fails a couple of saves. The other one can't save him. He's gone. He's full, complete dead. Negative 60 hit points. I mean, he's gone. His brain is done. Okay. The other one goes in. Kills the mind flayer, right? He's able. He's like one turn behind him. He kills him. Goes in, and then all of these sort of helpers come around, and they're freaking out. And now he starts feeling the ship tilt, because what he just did was kill the thing that's driving the ship, and now no one's driving the ship. The ship goes down. He dies. That was the end of the campaign. He had no other way to help himself. So what he did at the end, the one whose brain had gotten eaten, he was a ranger, and he had an animal companion, and it was a hawk. And so the character who was still alive, he took this key that they had found and this magic item they had found, and he gave it to the hawk, and he told the hawk and make sure that our patron Balon the Beardless, you give him these things. And that was the last scene in the campaign. I mean, totally amazing. I mean, it was really super fun.
Now you've got young people, and this is their first ever campaign of D&D. How did they handle the end of their first campaign, it being like you died and the bad guys got away? Well, I guess the bad guys didn't get away, right? They crashed too.
Heroic. Yeah. It was heroic death.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, it was heroic. Yeah, and because they actually quieted the Grindel root too. Right. So they actually saved the whole deep too, because before they got on the ship, they went and made sure that they could take care of the Grindel root. How did they take it? One of them, the one who's got his brain eaten, he was totally okay. He was trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? What can I make my hawk do? How can I help? Mm-hmm. How can I make sure we actually take... Like, he was totally fine. The other one, I think he was a little... he chose to play a druid, and that's a really hard class for a newcomer. And I'm not sure that he understood ins and outs and the really optimum ways to use that class, which... I'm really flexible, so it wasn't necessary that they... Of course, I say this after telling you I gave them a mind flayer, right? But it's not necessary. It's not necessary for them to be totally min-maxed to play in a game of mine and not just get slaughtered, right? I'm really flexible about giving them a lot of leeway, especially because I want them to really enjoy the game. I just think he was disappointed. He's the type of person and the type of player who he wanted that character to go all the way to 20th level. He wanted me to make up the rest of a whole campaign. I mean, they have spring break in a couple weeks. When they have spring break, they get... And he told his mom, okay, I want to schedule my spring break. I want Sam to come over and run a game here, and then here, and then here, and then here, like 2 or 3 times a week for the 2 weeks that they're on spring break. So I know they had fun. Told my coworker, their mom, that like they might die. And, I asked her, do you think, because I can get a read on them, but I'm not their parent. So I asked her, do you think that they'll be upset? And she said, well, if it's part of the game, it's part of the game. They have to learn that lesson, I guess. Like, if it's necessary, it's not necessary. It's not like I'm planning on doing it. I'm not setting out to kill them, but it might happen. And she seemed to think it was fine, and they took it pretty well. Now, I shouldn't since then, so I'm definitely going to talk to them.
Do you know what your next campaign is going to be?
So I asked, at the end of that, we talked about what they wanted to do next, and one of them decided he wants to play a rogue, so he wants to play in a city so that he can picking pockets and dealing with thieves guild kind of stuff. So I'm probably that's why anybody who's been following me on Twitter has noticed I've been tweeting out, what city should I use? And if I don't want to use Waterdeep, what should I use? And I gave, I'm thinking Baldur's Gate, I'm thinking Sharn, Brass, I'm thinking Greyhawk, I'm thinking Specularum from Mystara, I'm thinking, like, I've had this giant list, and I did 3 polls, and Sharn won. The problem is I don't know if I want to do it in Eberron. So as much as Sharn won, I was also looking at Zobek, from Midgard, from Cobalt Press. I mean, I don't know. Probably what's going to happen is I'm going to take some elements from each of those, enter city in my homebrew world, and have that be it.
Could you finagle things so that this Grindelroot campaign is in the same setting? So then, like, they see, like, the heroic statues commemorating their previous characters and the sacrifice that they made that might help them be more okay with all of that?
Yeah. I'm definitely going to do something. I just don't. The thing is, I'm having this fight with myself, actually, and this is the question I want to ask you, both of you, and the audience as well. So they want it to be in a city, and I want them. I have 2 issues. The first issue is they consume everything D&D. So these are the kids who they keep checking out the monster manual from the library, and they're memorizing statistics because they enjoy it, right? Not because they're trying to mess up my game, but just because they enjoy it. And I wrote a blog post about how, here's what I have to do, and here's some tips. If you have players who know all the stats, it's okay to think about when you're doing all that. So there's that issue. So they already have the Avernus book, so I can't use Baldur's Gate Avernus because they'll know everything. They'll literally they're sponges. They're just so. And I normally don't have a problem with that, except they don't know how to separate player knowledge from character knowledge, and they have shown me that they don't know how to do that in the game. So it's sort of a fine line for me. So I've already decided to use that campaign, but I would like to give them something iconic and with lots of the typical fantasy tropes and that sort of thing in a big city, which is why I started saying, well, I don't know what city to use. But yes, I probably will. You're making a great point. I probably will do something where that mountain thing was in the past, and now, it's been maybe a couple decades or so, maybe 50 years even. And so there's statues, and it's a known sort of historical event that occurred that has had a large on that setting. I just don't know what it's going to be.
I've got a few areas to.
I have 2 weeks.
2 weeks to figure it out. So I have 2 thoughts that come to mind. One, if they're highly sort of charged into or plugged into the WotC releases or whatever, they may not be as into some of the third parties, right? So you mentioned Zobek. Pick up a bunch of the Midgard stuff and include a bunch of that. And then you can also bring in the Tome of Beasts and Creature Codex sort of stuff, and suddenly the Monster Manual memorization becomes moot as well. My other thought was, DM's Guild is a great source of ideas and adventures and what have you, and you could do that, and it would incorporate things that they haven't seen before or aren't expecting. And particularly coming to mind, JVC Perry has his campaign Into the Deep, which then you get a whole campaign out of it, not just a collection of adventures that you string together, and that might be an interesting way to go too.
Yeah. Yeah. Call from the Deep.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
I have the exact opposite suggestion.
Okay.
So because I think that's a totally viable suggestion, and I think that's awesome. And I got Tome of Beasts right over there. I pull from third-party stuff all the time because I have a similar situation in where 2 of my players in my major campaign are DMs themselves and have been playing for just as long, if not longer. And so it's not that they've memorized the books because they're trying to be ravenous about it. They're in the same situation I am. They're running their own games. Right. So they know a lot. And even though they are very good about separating player knowledge from character knowledge, most of the time, even they forget. We all do. So my suggestion is, if you want to say you want to do Baldur's Gate, you want to grab the Avernus book, even if they never go to Avernus, you're going to set it in Baldur's Gate. Take the time to, in like a session 0, as they're planning how they want to approach this game, go ahead and set it in Baldur's Gate and throw at them immediately things that are different, and then reward them for player knowledge, for character knowledge that is things that they would already know. So if they've gone ahead and read through all of Baldur's Gate, and so they know all the street names, they know all the place names and everything, and be like, all right, your character in Baldur's Gate, and their background is going to be someone who grew up here, so you know all of this stuff already. And so they can, as players, pull on that knowledge and feel like they're inhabiting that character, but then immediately throw a curveball of like this thing that you think you know is completely different. And so you can start to teach them it's okay to ask the question, does my character know this? And then if you say yes, they can run with it. You know, I don't want to get into that. I can get into some other things, but that's what I would do. Is I would just throw something at them that's in the session 0 that is not what they expect, and talk through difference between player character and that kind of knowledge.
And if you're going to play...
Yeah. I only have one problem with that, and that is I don't know the Forgotten Realms very well.
So what? So
for me to prep Baldur's Gate, I would have to do a ton of work.
Okay, so maybe you do it in Sharn, or wherever you're going to pull from. If you think that, that's whatever city is that you feel comfortable in, and make up what you want and discard what you want, and I just go for it like that.
And if you're up for, and I know you are, because you do it all the time, homebrewing your own story, right? Instead of pulling something, then that actually becomes a really interesting way of coming up with the inspiration for the story. Hey, something's different. Something's not the way it's described in the published material. Well, that's an interesting question. Why is that? What's going on? What caused that? Is it an incursion of mind flayers, and it actually isn't different, but everybody thinks it is because they're messing with people's minds, or or is there an illusionist running around and changing things, or whatever. Like, that could be a fun story too. Is okay, something's not what you expected, and you grew up here. That shouldn't be. What's going on? Like, that'd be fun.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah. God, why do I have to like playing this game so much? I've just gave myself 20 hours of work.
You got nothing else going on. Don't forget to keep editing episodes, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, thank you both for your advice. I'm already thinking in my brain how to incorporate both of those points of view into what I'm going to end up doing, and trying to make something really fun for my players. And so I appreciate it. Thank you.
It'll be fun to hear about in next month's episode, to see what you end up doing with it. So it's always fun when you talk about your other game from D&D Brief as well, right? I always enjoy talking about it here, and then I listen to it when the podcast comes out and see, okay, what did he do with it? Because like I got thank yous from your players because I suggested the apparatus of Koalish to you, right? And then it doesn't work. Yeah. It doesn't work like a normal apparatus of Koalish. It's a little different. Now things are going weird, right? So that's fun too.
Yeah, and it just got them in a ton of trouble. So I'm
caught up. So I at least know the trouble they're aiming for. So. All right, before we move on and let Lauren talk, I want to remind all of our listeners, if you want to support the show, you can do so by shopping at Amazon or DM's Guild and getting there through the links at thetomeshow.com. So that is a way to get some support for us. You get the exact same experience, same prices, same everything. We get a couple pennies thrown in there, and then the Amazon money goes to all of our contributors and help those who regularly help out. I appreciate all of that, and I hope they do as well. And the DM's Guild affiliate link I use to get review products from when we do PDF episodes. So those are all great ways to support us. All right, Lauren, it's your time. I'm putting 15 minutes on the clock, and then you can ignore it like we do. So go ahead.
All right. So since I'm new to the show and I'm a guest here, I'll give you a brief synopsis of what my campaign is currently going through, since I don't have anything to draw from previous episodes. So Dungeon Drunks at the moment are a bunch of level 13 characters who are based in the Forgotten Realms, although as you've probably guessed from my previous answer to questions, it is half homebrew, half Forgotten Realms. So I set them in the middle of Waterdeep, and then I make up stuff all the time. I've destroyed Red Larch. They're probably going to Neverwinter, and I'm making up half in Neverwinter. I just do that all the time.
I got very specific advice once from Ed Greenwood to just ignore whatever you want to ignore and blow up the world he created. He doesn't care and he encourages it. So you're doing it perfectly. Yep. That's the exact Forgotten Realms. So.
Oh yeah, I make up. I look at the published material out there for the stuff that I'm bad at making up, which is like street names and places and titles of things, and then I just make up the rest. And I do enough DMing off the top of my head that it is often completely different than what's in the published adventures. And we don't run the published adventures. I do homebrew campaigns. So this has been the most recent arc that my players are on. One of my characters has a backstory that involves their family being involved with a deal with a devil, which this has been ongoing for the last couple of years in my campaign, long before Baldur's Gate came out. So it's been interesting to pull new stuff from Avernus. So they are the current in-world thing that they are doing is after multiple going on with this devil, the devil no longer is getting what she needs from this deal. And the character, his name is Travancore, has a medallion that has her true name on it. They've just discovered this. And she has basically offered that if he can figure out a way to destroy this thing, because the medallion can be used to basically at any time. And she is an Erinyes who is a frontline general in the Blood War, and no longer is just someone trying to grab souls. She is hardcore demons, and it's embarrassing every time she gets pulled away from that. So she has told him, if you can figure out a way to destroy this thing, I will release your family from the con. This has been generations of a thing that he has been trying to take care of. And in my game world, they know of a way to destroy this powerful object, but it is a very closely guarded secret. Fortunately, it is level 13 characters that in Waterdeep that have saved the city of Waterdeep from multiple things. They have enough clout that they've been told about the secret and are in the process of trying to go there when things went bad. There's a bunch of Yugoloths who have been hired because the Yugoloths have been hired by the demons who are like, no, we want this Erinyes to be just gone all the time. Also, another one of my characters, the person who is guiding them to this very special secret location, is a relative of hers. And after multiple years of this campaign, this is the first time that this Bernie, the cleric in my party, has this whole backstory that she's never talked about. Her family, her name is something that they've never heard her real name. Big spoilers for Dungeon Drunks, by the way. So the last episode that we had, everything came to a head, and it was good yelling, and it was one of those yelling. Well, it was in character, very intense backstory yelling and betrayal, and then we would finish. And for my podcast, we play and record, and then I do all the editing offline. So it was intense. And then there was a moment, and then my friend was like, "You're okay, right? You know, is all okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, that was awesome. That was awesome." So like post yelling check-in, but they are at a point in where they've reached a road, and this Yugoloth has basically stopped them, and they have to take care of this thing before they can move the amulet. And as part of that, they've decided to go to Neverwinter, which was not on the agenda. The reason it came, and this is going to be part of my question and part of the fun thing that I wanted to talk about, that happened was I'm close to the end of this campaign. Eventually it's going to end, and we're going to roll up new characters and start a new campaign. And I've been talking to them about some of the things that I wanted to bring into the new campaign. An option from someone named David Nett, who talked about, they called it I Know a Guy. We've been calling it I Know a Person. And it's the idea of like workshopping on the fly with a person in your party who hey, oh, I know in this city, and then like workshopping that NPC
Right.
and then doing a roll or two to figure out what their relationship is. And my players liked the idea so much at the time, came up basically right in that episode. I'm like, well, I think this is fun. Let's do this. That character ended up being a former professor of my wizard character from the Neverwinter Academy, who, as a thing off the top of my head, said that she could only hang around for a little bit because she needed to get back to Neverwinter because she's got a friend who's performing in the opera. And that eventually turned into, well, we should just go to Neverwinter and go to the academy and get all of your academy friends to help out with this Yugoloth problem that we have. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to come up with an opera because they're going to go to the opera first, of course. Why aren't they going to go to the opera? Oh, potions.
Well, that's what I thought you were going to say was they decided, forget that Yugoloth for a while. Let's go see this opera. I think that sounds great.
And pretty smart.
And when you say you got to come up with an opera, like in my mind, that is I should come up with a clever title. What does come up with an opera mean to you?
Well, see, now I am a classical musician, so I pulled my book over there of operas. I actually, I don't want to talk about it too much because we haven't. I actually pulled an opera and reflavored it and changed a few things to work perfectly. And so,
are you going to perform the music?
So yeah,
you gonna sing?
Probably. No. I play a bard. I'm not that kind of bard. I wasn't going to come up with the whole opera, but then they actually said a very smart thing, which is they're going to go to the opera, not just because it'll be fun to go to the opera, but when the professor talked about that's why she has to leave because she's going to go support her friend, there is a professor of enchantment, but she sidelines teaching bards how to use their bardic abilities. She's this very flamboyant character. So she's going to go watch one of her former students perform in this opera. They want to go to the opera not just to enjoy it, but because they're like, well, we'll be able to schmooze with some of the other professors that are there and some of these other powerful people. We're going to be able to help with this issue. And I'm like, that's too smart not to have to do with an opera. So that's all fine. I'm going to create Neverwinter out of pretty much nothing because, like, it's been forever since I played the video game, and I'm just going to make up stuff. I don't know. I've got a map, and I've got what's in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and the rest of it's going to be off the top of my head in a couple names. The good problem I'm having, and the advice I would like to get, this, I know a person worked really well. Mm-hmm. And so now two more of my players immediately were like, I know a person. We went through. So my cleric was, I know a person in Neverwinter that we can go get help from, and we workshopped through that. And so that character is going to show up in Neverwinter, and I'm excited about that. But I literally was at the same time, I'm like, I know a person. So in the next game that we're going to get together with the I know a person from my barbarian, what I need advice from is how do we turn this cool thing that everybody enjoys that has worked twice now? How do we keep that from becoming the thing that takes over the next 5 games?
That's like, because you're having fun with the I know a person concept, and it was talked about ahead of time, and everybody was on board, and it sounded fun. And now that you've done it, like that's the campaign, isn't it? It's just I know a person. Let's go visit everybody.
We don't want it to go down that road. It hasn't gone that far just yet. But the fact that everybody jumped on, like, it's a good problem to have, but it's also like I want to make. Right. I don't want this to turn into the balance is supposed to be that they roll to see how this NPC responds to them. So I think once the roll goes bad and that person does the betrayal, think about it a little bit more. But I would like to avoid it either needing to get to that point or us getting tired of this before we get to that point, because that might happen because my players roll really friggin' well. So
is the idea that they can only use the I know a person like once per campaign? Is that the concept?
I don't know. We did not get that far in it. Literally before the episode that we recorded, the game that we recorded, I had talked about this and we all liked the idea. Naturally came up in game. So we just did it before I had a chance to define it. I'm hesitant to make it let's only do it once a campaign because I feel like that might sound like I'm punishing the players who have already jumped on board. But I do feel like I need to come up with a reasonable limitation on this so that it doesn't get overplayed.
Well, I wonder since
What my
oh, go ahead.
comment? Go ahead. What I was going to say was, my worry was when you do have that person who knows the person, and they roll bad, that's going to feel like a punishment. All the other players had this great experience with their person that they knew, and this person got stuck with the bad roll. Like, could go bad.
Yeah.
That could go bad. Not that it will, but it could, right? Because it depends. But
well, and you're right about that. They do know that it can go bad. So that is the one.
Yeah.
That is
Right.
they know going into it at the end of this, everything we say is going to be true. And I'm going to do this roll and it would go bad depending on that roll. And I don't tell them what actually will go bad. They just do the roll in secret. And then when they meet the person, and it doesn't mean that if they roll poorly, that this person is going to show up and kill them or try to kill them, that things are more difficult, or maybe this person isn't exactly what they remembered.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say is maybe they discover on their way to go see this person, they actually discover something about the person, or when they get there, they discover something about the person that kind of changes the tenor of what they thought their relationship was.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, which is realistic, but like a punishment.
Yeah.
Although
my question to you is,
I was gonna say,
go ahead,
maybe the person you roll bad, maybe the person is turns out they've been captured, and now suddenly the person you were going to for help has just become a side quest, and now you've got to go deal with that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
exactly.
My question was going to be, is this a problem that should be dealt with out of game? Like, maybe you should with the group after the next session or something, and say, hey, here's something I've been thinking about, and here are my concerns are this could go bad in the way that it directs the campaign in the way that you didn't really want, not you, but or that one person who does accidentally get the bad roll feels punished, and that's not fun for anyone. Talk about maybe we should put some parameters on this after everyone has had a chance to do this. The limit is once per campaign, or everybody can do it, but it's really absolutely necessary. Like, this is the only way to get this task completed that we have to complete.
Yeah.
I
think you're absolutely right that this is one of those times where I need to talk to everybody, and it'll be a good talk because so far it's been super successful. We have had a lot of fun, so it's going to be let's make sure that we don't have too much dessert kind of. I would just like to and I definitely want to make sure that the quote unquote bad roll that happens isn't just someone's here to betray you, or that it's a full on punishment. It's still it needs to be an interesting role play experience that isn't necessarily an in character positive. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I need to talk to them. I would just like to come to the table. I haven't figured out what my suggestion is. So yeah, maybe it is once a campaign for everybody after we get through everybody.
Right, and I think. So you talked about it originally in the context of eventually you're going to have the next campaign, and you wanted to incorporate this. You talked about incorporating this rule into the next campaign, and so maybe in the next campaign, you let them use it whenever they want to, with the understanding that it could go poorly, right? And even make it maybe there's a 60% chance that it's helpful and a 40% chance that there's some sort of consequence. So it's not an inconsequential chance that things are complicated, right? No.
There's my time. I've gone over. All right, goodbye, everybody.
But then I think you can say and talk to like Sam said, you talk to the group, but be like, this is sort of our initial foray into this experiment. We're going to incorporate it thoroughly into the next campaign. But in the meantime, for now, for this campaign, let's give everybody a chance to pull it once. Just to, I'm not punishing anybody. I'm not rewarding anybody. I understand some people have already used it, whatever. But let's maybe talk about whether or not that's the appropriate way of handling it for this campaign so that it doesn't get oversaturated, right? And then for the next campaign, you figure out how to do it and how it's going to work there. If it were me in the next campaign, I would almost incorporate it into a session 0 and like, hey, this is the setting. Tell me who you know now. Like you're gonna do some world building. You're gonna tell me what this world looks like and who's in it. And maybe they're not in the place that you met them. They could be anywhere when you need them to be. But like, let's define them now, and then that gives you a bunch of hooks to play with as a DM. So.
Also, when you define, you ask them for the good part of the relationship. Like maybe it's that the person knows something or that they have something that could help. But then also have the players give you a drawback to that relationship. And then they know that both of those things are going to be important for that NPC, and you're not the one doing the work figuring that out, right? And it can be vague enough will help determine it, because when it's used in the game, you're not sure when it's going to be used, but you'll at least know, and they'll know there's a drawback advantage, both. And then it's their choice to get the advantage, but then have to deal with the drawback consequences.
Yeah. Have that discussion for at least for this campaign of but it's, I mean, as I said, it's one of those happy problems in where it's gone so well so far that I just want to make sure that we don't OD on our steak.
I really like those elements of games where you can give the players some world building control. I was really inspired several years ago. Will Wheaton, I don't know if you ever watched, ran Titan's Grave, an adventure for Fantasy Age that he wrote, right? And he did a fantastic job of that. And now that's my go-to. Like every time they're wandering, my players are wandering through the city or they go into a shop or whatever. And I think to myself for a moment, every now and then when I'm really on my game, I think to myself for a moment, what question would Will Wheaton ask him in this situation, right? and then pull that trick on him. And so so anytime, and this is a great example of that, right? You're asking your players to do some world building. They're creating an NPC, and that helps build out and flesh out the world, and that's always a lot of fun. And it takes some of the load off of me as the DM. I don't have to be creative and come up with everything. You can help me out. So.
And the players decide when they do that. It lets them, and it can help them out of a jam too. Like it literally, the reason it came up was so that, my wizard player was like, I don't, this isn't my speciality, but hey, I think I know someone from my past. And so it helped advance the plot. It gave me a character to play with. It really did. It was A+. Would do again, just not every session.
See, I thought for a second there you were going to say that the wizard got stuck into a jar of strawberry preserves, and so it literally helped them out of a jam. That's
the next session. Yes, that's the mimic that I'm going to be throwing at them. Would be the jar of preserves.
Jeff, you just gave away the topic.
Yeah. Oh, a wizard got shrunk and stuck in a jar of preserves.
I will say. So if anyone's watching, if anyone's listening for Dungeon Drunks right now, and you don't want to be spoiled, I will say the opera that I'm pulling from is The Elixir of Love by Donizetti, and really about love potions, because I went, well, why not? The other interesting reason that I pulled from that opera is because historically that opera was written super fast, and there's evidence that the original actor, opera singer who played the lead role had a stutter. And so I've been looking for a way to incorporate a variety of characters into, and this was, hey, this is a historical person who was still completely successful as an opera singer, even though they had a stutter. And it's incorporated into the opera as well. So I've changed some things, and it's slightly different and it involves potions, but I went, well, how can I not do an opera about a love potion in D&D? That's kind of
absolutely.
That's
Very
awesome.
Good. All right, can we call that the end of your time? You went over just a few seconds.
I went over by a good 40 minutes.
Yeah.
You
That's okay.
still haven't broken Mike Shea's
No.
record, so don't worry.
No.
Like a good DM, I prepped for a session and I actually prepped.
Yeah.
And so we're just going to keep on going.
Yep, absolutely. I'll use those maps next time. That's fine. So,
Exactly.
all right, so I'm going to go next, but before I do, I want to let people know if you want to support the show directly, you can do that as a patron. Go to patreon.com/The Tome Show, and you can chip in, $1 a month or $5 a month or whatever you think you want to do, and we really appreciate that. That goes to helping pay the Tome Show's bills. So I don't lose money on this hobby of mine. So, so that's that. Let's get into my time. I've started my clock. So I am running my Dragon Heist, Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign. That is also going to be a Curse of Strahd campaign. I've mashed up these concepts, and so they'll do Dragon Heist, and then the Mist will roll in, several months later after they've had a time to settle down and whatever. And I'm thinking I haven't decided exactly yet, but I'm thinking the Mist is gonna take the entirety of Trollskull Alley with it into Barovia, and all. Now they've got NPCs they got to protect and try to get back and raise the stakes a little bit. And I've been layering in all these things, and there's going to be a finale to the campaign wherein by defeating Strahd and coming home, they're also bringing the Amber Temple back to the Forgotten Realms, and all the dark powers escape. And then they're going to have to run around and deal with that. And I'm using that to incorporate some, like one of the dark powers is going to choose the Pit Fiend Gargoth as his champion, and then they're going to have to, defeat it by trapping it into the shield that will then come up in the next campaign when I run Avernus, right? It's the Shield of the Hidden Lord, and all that. But the point where we're at now, I very intentionally, when they got the map to show them where the campaign, Dragon Heist kicks off real hard when they go to, there's this, what is it, chapter 4 or 5 or whatever, Dragon Season, where it's different depending on the season that you're playing, but like things start going real fast from that point on. And so I wanted to give them some time in between. So I basically put a timer on the map, right? On the full moon of this night, then the location you needed to go to will appear. Now we've got 10 days that you can kind of go off and do all these faction missions that you've been ignoring and do all these side things that you wanted to do. So I've been doing that for a while, and I've been pulling in extra side missions, faction missions from Sly Flourish's Fantastic Adventures, and I've pulled in some from Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and so we're getting to play all these different things, and it's going really well, and it's a lot of fun. But we got to a point where it was getting a little bit long in the tooth. Right? The players were like, can we get on with the narrative? And also, we haven't leveled in like months, and it's getting tiresome. Like, because I don't want them to go to Curse of Strahd and be like 3 levels higher than they're supposed to be, and I have to completely redo everything. But then I decided, you know what? Though, like I'm an experienced enough DM. If I have to ramp things up, I can do that pretty easily when I get to Curse of Strahd. Let's let them have the pace of leveling and whatever that's going to make the game fun. But I also cut some of the extra missions. Like I was about to use the Fantastic Adventures Crashed Palace, which is one that I really like. A dead angel or an angel shows up and dies and tells them that there was this celestial temple or palace that crashed up in the mountains, and there's a demon up there trying to summon like a pit fiend or whatever. So you better go up and stop him. Angel dies, right? So like I had a session where like the cliffhanger was you show up at the temple and an angel is laying there and it dies in front of you, but it passed on a message. And then we stopped, right? And then I thought better of it. I'm like, this is going to add like 3 more sessions, and there's all these other things like there's this assassination thing going on. I pulled the Gloom, I think it was. There was another one where somebody was trying to kidnap some like noble kid or whatever, and it was also from Fantastic Adventures. And I was going to pull that one in as well, and I introduced that like concept into them. I gave them that hook, and then by the next session, I'm like, yeah, but I can't actually do all of this, right? So I had the angel's message be completely different, and it was more of like a prophecy of their importance towards the defeat or thwarting of the dark powers that's going to happen like 10 levels from now, right? Okay, that'll work well. That's fine. And then the kidnapping I had changed so that it was one of the Castellanter's children that was supposed to be kidnapped. And they went off to be like, "Hey, we need to help you. We heard that there's a kidnapper that's coming after one of your kids." And they're like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And then the constables are walking out with a stretcher, and it's got the dead body of the kidnapper on it, which helps solidify, like, you don't want to mess with the Castellanters. These are serious casters, and they're powerful, right? So it still furthered things, but it sort of got me out of having to run that whole side quest, right? And got them to move on. And then, of course, that next session, after we realized we got to skip all of that and go straight to the next things, and I told them, as soon as you find the Stone of Galore, you'll gain a level, right? So that's your milestone. That's what you're aiming for. So they decided to spend the next session was basically a shopping episode, right? They're like, well, we got some time, we got some downtime. Let's just do a bunch of downtime stuff and clean up some loose ends here, and let's go shopping, right? And this was also an opportunity I found to lean on their connections they've been building with the factions, right? To this point, I felt like they were doing a lot for the factions and weren't really seeing the point because the factions weren't doing a lot for them. And so they were like, well, we want to find some magic weapons. We're starting to run into some things that can only be hurt by magic, and that's killing us, right? And I don't want to set up a situation where they can just like go out to the magic shop and buy magic weapons. So I used the Xanathar, I think is it Xanathar guide that has the downtime rules. Is that the right book?
Yeah.
So we use the downtime rules for there where, you know, it takes a certain amount of money and a certain amount of time to find the things that you want, the magic items you want to buy. In this case, they had the time. I allowed them to use their connections. And they asked the Harpers, hey, you know people, you can make these connections. Can you find us some +1 short swords or whatever, right? They didn't want anything major. And so I allowed them, like, that's fine. Like, they can go out. You still have to pay for them. We're not going to, like, destroy our connections by taking their stuff from them. You still have to pay for it, but so they got to see some value out of the Harpers. And then I made the point afterwards, like, okay, but like you've stretched your connection to us pretty hard. Like our alliance doesn't go infinitely. Like you don't ask for us for anything for a while, right? We appreciate what you've done. We've helped you out here, but like let's not go crazy. Now they have all these other factions they can get help with too. So that's happened, and in that same time period, I had Jarlaxle come and visit them in the form of JB Nevercaught, right? Which, by the way, is the perfect name for a Jarlaxle alias, right? First of all, his last name is Nevercaught, and they caught on to that and laughed about it, but it wasn't until this instance where he revealed himself that they caught, oh, JB, that's Jarlaxle Baneray, right? So, like, he's not really even hiding it that much. He's a hat salesman, and Jarlaxle is famous for his big floofy hat, whatever. So JB Nevercaught shows up and like walks into the cellar of Trollskull Manor where they're scheming and making their plans. Just walks in and like, I know what's going on, right? And tells them, look, I know you're aiming to find the vault with all this gold in it, right? And I get it. And let's all just like let's and he's like, I'm gonna be up front and on board. Like I get like the right thing to do is return it to the city. It's the city's money. It's been stolen by Daggelt Neverember, right? And it's tax money. It should go back to the people of Waterdeep. I'm not gonna be that guy that says give it to me, right? But can you let me return it to the city? Because that would get me some clout, and I'm trying to bring my organization and go legit, right? And they're like, well, we don't know if we trust them. And then one of the players is like, wait a minute, it's stolen money? I thought we were just going to get rich. And suddenly it turned into this big moral drama of them coming to terms with, oh my gosh, wait, we didn't even think, all these sessions, we forgot that it was stolen. Like, we just thought we were going after all this money to get rich, right? And that's legit. But I wanted to set up that they had to think about that before they get to the end, because hauling all of that money out would take multiple trips, even with a bag of holding, right? It would just getting it physically out of the vault would take multiple trips, and eventually somebody's going to show up and be like, hey, I'm Laryl Silverhand. What are you doing with all my gold? You know, and they're going to have to deal with that. They can't win that fight. So I wanted to set the stage and prepare them for the fact that that's going to be a conflict, right? If you get into this, somebody's going to come looking for that money. And I think that was a shock to them, and they had a big debate discussion about it, and I think they were starting to come to terms with all of that. Then last session, which was just last Friday, we ran the actual dragon season. And in the summer, it starts at the Castellantor Mausoleum out in the City of the Dead. You find the one surviving cultist who tells them, oh, they tried to kill us, and they took it, and they're probably going to this headquarters that we know of at this old abandoned windmill. You go there, and you show up just in time to see them passing the stone off to some spine devils, who then go flying off with it, and then it's a rooftop chase scene to catch the spine devils. And I modified the chase rules. I thought the official D&D chase rules were kind of overly mechanical. And so I ripped off some ideas from the Torg Eternity chase rules, because they have chase rules because it's a very cinematic game. Like it's supposed to play like you're in a movie. And so I changed it there, where I used like the obstacles table from the chase that's in the book, but instead I had somebody roll every round. Okay, this obstacle comes up, or there's a 50% chance there's no obstacle, but sometimes this obstacle comes up. You have to succeed at whatever that check is in order to have a chance to proceed to the next stage of the chase. And there's 4 steps to the chase, and whoever gets to the end of the chase first, is victorious in there, gets to the end of the chase, right? And there's some things I would do a little differently, but it went really well. They were happy with it. It was appropriately dramatic. It felt crazy, running across the top. 2 of my characters are ASMR, so they popped out their wings and flew after them. So I gave them advantage over avoiding all these things, because how hard is it to do a rooftop chase when you can fly, right? And then it concludes in an alleyway where they're supposed to the devils are supposed to hand off the stone to this doppelganger that works for the Castellanters, which I changed because one of the characters put into their background that they have a rival from their history. This is a tiefling character who's actually from the city of Dis, who's now moved into Waterdeep with her family. But this other family moved with them as well, and there's this rival that's always better than her, named Zeri. So I'm like, well, that guy works for the Castellanters. That's the guy who's they're handing the stone off to, right? So the rival is there and has the stone, and they fight for a while. There's the bearded devil and other imps there and whatever, and they have their fight while he runs away. But what I didn't know is that the character who came up with Zeres as the rival this whole time has been building up this backstory that she never told me about. And so it turns out in her mind, Zeres isn't just a rival from her childhood. He's a former lover. And now she's like, oh crap, I'm going to have to kill him and I can't do it. Right? And so yeah, right? We got to the end of the session and she's like, man, that was really stressful. Good stressful, but really stressful, right? Of having to figure out and I'm like, well, that's cool, and I'm glad you had fun. I wish you had told me that you were building up this background, right? And so I could have played with that and done some more with it. But he ultimately got away. So the way that it's supposed to play out, there's another chase scene through the streets. I'm like, we don't need 2 chase scenes more or less in a row broken up by a fight. I made it more of a cutscene. He ran out, he bumps into a bunch of people, he falls over. You see those 3 orphans that you've met, and then he's there, and you surround him, and he uses. I statted him up as a warlock, so he uses one of his spells and just sort of teleports away. The orphans stole the stone off of him like they do in the book. Now, in the book, they steal the stone off of him and take off down into the cellars, and then you have to team up with them and find it, and there's a mimic and whatever. They caught on that, you guys probably stole that thing, right? I lived on the streets before. I know what it's like. And so they just got it from him before the cellar scene, which was fine. It wasn't necessary. But then I had the watch still show up, because the final scene of that chase for the stone is the watch shows up and said, hey, you just caused a lot of chaos in the middle of a really busy street in Waterdeep. We need to bring you in for questioning, right? And so I did that. And so they went in they went into the courthouse. They were locked up for a few hours. It was like, hey, the magistrate will be here, in a few hours or whatever. In the meantime, stay here. We'll keep your stuff safe and confiscate it. And one of the characters pulled the sleight of hand check and hid the stone, right? So they still have the stone on him. But then, as the book says, like, in the original, the doppelganger shows up. In this case, Zeres, the rival, who has the ability to cast disguise self, shows up in the disguise of one of the captain of the watch, and he's like, "Hey, so we hear that you've been chasing people around looking for this stone. Why don't you go ahead and tell me where it is? We'll keep it safe and make sure nobody gets it." And they're like, no, right? And then he tips his hand and gets mad at him. No, give me the stone, right? Give it to, and then they realize who it is and what's going on. And he walks out, and then they're there for a little bit longer. And then the Blackstaff shows up because they have connections with Force Grey. And so they've met the Blackstaff a few times, and so once again the factions are helpful to them, and shows up and says, "Hey, let's just say they were working for me. Let them out, right? They're on the up and up and whatever." And so then somebody, one of the characters, attunes to the Stone of Galore, and I'm playing. I modified a little bit of the Stone of Galore. There's a popular alternative approach to Dragon Heist Waterdeep that I'm not following, but I stole some inspiration from, called the Alexandrian Remix. And I don't remember the name of the website of the person who did it, but it gets a lot of attention on like the Dragon Heist Facebook group. People there talk about it a lot. But one of the ideas he had was the Stone of Galore. Actually, the three eyes come out, and it becomes more powerful the more eyes that are put back into it, right? And right now in my game, it only has one eye. So the only thing it can do is tell you where the vault is and the keys to get in, right? The second eye is actually in the vault, and the third eye that can be used to wipe the memory of something from existence, which is why nobody knows where the vault is the third power that it has. But the third eye is in Barovia, so they'll find it when they go into Curse of Strahd, right? But the Stone of Galore is kind of a jerk, right? It's a superior attitude. What is it? Aboleth. That's been changed into this stone, and it thinks and knows for a fact it's better than everybody. And so it's kind of a jerk to the one player who attunes to it. The player's like, you know what, fine, and pops out the one eye and says, I'll just keep this in my pocket. And, so they found out where the vault is. They found out the keys, and then he pops out the eye just to punish it for being a jerk. Which is fine, and we'll see sort of where that goes. And then I made the three pieces to the keys to get into the vault 3 coins. One of them is a soul coin, which is then tying us into the next campaign, so a cameo of that. One of them is a coin from Barovia, sort of tying into where we're going next. And then one of them is the coin that one of the coins that is mentioned in the adventure Blue Alley, which I had incorporated earlier. Where there's a coin that commemorates the 50th anniversary of Open Lord Paladin Son, Peregrine Paladin Son. And so they already have that coin. The other two, they're like, well, where are we going to find it? They tap some of their contacts and they find out, hey, you know who's a big coin collector that has a lot of rare coins like that? The Castlanters. You should totally look into that, right? So now they got a reason to go to the party at the Castellanter estate. Which is where my question, I guess, comes in. I've ranted a lot now. My question comes in with the Castellanter estate. So they need to get in. I'm thinking that the coin is being protected by the elder son that's been transformed into a chain devil because of their deal gone bad. And I'm not sure if they're going to go in before the party or during the party or whatever. Like, it can't be a go in and just fight your way through. I tried to establish with them earlier, like, the Castellanters are powerful, right? They obliterated this kidnapper. So I'm curious how you would approach, I guess, that having them go into a situation where they have to play a very different style than they've played before. This is the actual heist, I guess, of Dragon Heist for them, right? Because going into the vault's not really a heist. But this is like, how do I approach it with them, the idea that they got to go into this place and not sort of just go in guns blazing?
Well, how much do they know about the party and what else is going on in the Castellanter's
Well,
estate?
yeah,
Because the more they know, the more likely they're not going to go in guns blazing. If they know if your party is filled with people piss off or people that
right.
they shouldn't encounter, it's Castellanters. Why don't they have members of Forest Grey there? Why don't they have all these people there? Which can give your players an in, but also indicate to them, hey, maybe fighting our way through is not the correct
Mm-hmm.
way.
Maybe, yeah, and I don't know if you've played or read through Dragon Heist, but the Castellanters have a cult going on, and part of the storyline is that they're going to kill everybody who's there as well, and they don't really know
Yeah.
that yet. But I think, but they're starting to get some clues, and I think it would definitely. I'm hoping that it comes out when they actually go into the estate, right? But I don't know exactly how to tip that
Yeah.
hand without just tipping that hand, I'm sorting through that as well. So I'm open to all kinds of suggestions about how this should play out because it's likely to happen soon, like Friday.
I mean, is there a way to telegraph to them in game that they have to approach this differently from their typical MO without actually letting them fall right into the? Can you bring them up to the edge of it and telegraph to them that falling in would be really bad?
Maybe. I'm trying to think. I mean,
Like a minor NPC tips them off, right?
right.
Like, oh, this is something that's going on. You might not know these facts about this.
Right.
Let me tell you this. I'm doing you a favor. You're going to owe me one later, but this might save your life.
Well, and it could very well.
Also, by the way, while you're thinking of that, the Alexandrian remix
Yes.
that you're talking about, literally that's the Alexandrian.net is where
I saw you
that
posted
comes
it in the
from.
chat. Yes, thank you. And there's lots of good ideas there. I didn't.
Yeah, that's for the podcast,
Absolutely.
right?
I didn't run the Alexandrian remix,
Yeah.
but I stole some ideas from it that I thought were really interesting. So,
Sure.
I've
That's a
seen
great
a couple of
website.
versions of that, and it's very
Yeah.
cool. It's an interesting way of mixing that up. So yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, no, I think with all their faction connections, like it'd be real easy to play that in as well. And one of the players changed PCs partway through the game. He was just sort of losing interest with the previous one, so I let him make a new one, and we introduced him as, oh well, he's a barbarian, right? So he's this strongman dwarf who's famous for being super strong, coming out of what's the Gauntlgrim. And coming down to Waterdeep, and he's been hired by the Castellanters as security, but he's a little dim. Everybody recognizes he's not really security. They have that established. He's really just there because he's a famous strongman, and they want the guests to be able to come and gawk at him. So he's got an in. He hasn't been real quick to use it though, for information gathering. Like they've approached Castellanter Estate twice now, and he's never been like, "Hey, I work for him. Can I come in?" So it's never come up. But it could, and certainly they have contacts that could tell them. But I'm trying to wonder, do I just have one of their, do I just have Renaer Neverember or Mert show up and be like, "Hey, I hear you're going to the Castellanter Estate. Here's some stuff you should know," or should I? I'm hoping to wait a little bit and see if they think to ask ahead of time, because I tried to.
Or maybe it's. Well, I was going to say, you were talking about, like the Harpers, their connection to the Harpers being like, "Hey, we've given you this stuff, we've helped you out, and now don't talk to us for a little bit." If the Harpers come back and are like, "Hey, we hear you're looking into the Castellanters. We've been looking into them too because there's some shady stuff going on. We're calling in kind of this favor," like that could be that could be a way to reintegrate the faction dynamic back into it. And especially a bunch of the factions in Waterdeep would have a really good reason to be keeping an eye on the Castellanters and might have enough of the info you need to drop on your players to make them ask the right questions, or at least try, because best, and then sometimes they're just going to run on in and torch the place anyway.
And it was Renaer who told them that the Castellanters were coin collectors, and so and he's a member of the Harpers, so it makes sense that the Harpers would know, and they would be the exact sort of people to just sort of, "Hey, we hear you're looking at this. we need go ahead and go in and do this stuff because we've been watching them too. But like, also let's not make waves because that's totally the way the Harpers would work, right? Just be as low key as you can until you can't be, and then be out of there. So that could work really well. So no, that's good.
Also remember, right? Remember that if you want to, like, there's the golden rule, right? Where if you want to telegraph, if you're being subtle, they're not going to catch it.
Oh yeah.
If you're being a little less than subtle, they might catch 10% of it. If you actually have something you want them to know, you have to just make sure you tell them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be the DM saying it, but it needs to be telegraphed in a way that they catch that, okay, that's true, and it's going to have an impact on our decision making process.
I have a
and then if they Leroy Johnson it, well then they Leroy Johnson right? It. I mean, because
it was telegraphed. I have a druid who's a member of the Emerald Enclave, and that faction is really important to that character. And he's because of life, he's missed several like key sessions, and so the Emerald Enclave hasn't been as one of the more important factions. And I've been toying with the idea of doing some stuff with him out of character or away from the session from the last one that he missed, being like, well, he didn't just miss it because he was hanging out back in the manor, right? Something came up. And so maybe he got into a conversation with the Enclave who was like, hey, there's an imbalance going on right now, and it seems to be centered around these Castellanders. We think they've made some sort of dark deal. Right, and that would be an opportunity for him to be able to come at them with this information that could be helpful for the scheming that they already kind of had in place. So there's I got several good ways to sort of get an in on this. Thanks, guys, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Like, I wouldn't be surprised with all of the different ways that your players have of gathering that kind of information if they don't start questions. Give them the 5 minutes to mull over some options, and then just run with whatever they choose, right. Just whoever they decide to, hey, maybe we should just talk to so-and-so before we go, kick down the door. Right. That person just happens to have
what they need.
Hey, you don't want to do
well, and it's interesting that you'd think with all of the work they've done in establishing these connections to factions, the only faction they ever ask anything of is the Harpers. And their connection to the and they don't even have the most renown with the Harpers, right? They haven't done the most for the Harpers, but they know how to find Mert, or they think they do, because he told them when they first met, like, hey, come and find me at my estate or my manor or whatever. But like if you read the mechanics of that contact, like Mert tells them, yes, come find me at my house, and then if they go to him, there's only a 10% chance that he's there. Every single time they've gone, he hasn't been there. They've never actually found Mert at his house. so they don't.
Well, there's no reason why Mert can't be meeting with someone from Enclave and be Absolutely, like, hey, you're asking me the wrong questions, but I happen to have this dude, and if you want to talk to them, I'm gonna get of whatever you're doing because I've made the offer here. And then you reward both. You reward your Harper people for thinking about Mert, and then you reward your Emerald Enclave person who, the Emerald Enclave person goes, oh, I know this druid. Yeah, sure, I'll help you out.
Yeah, I got to start sending some messages on our group Discord to him so we can play all this out before Friday. So lots of good ideas. Thank you. I appreciate it. And now I just got to figure out which one's going to work. Okay, so we'll call that the end of my time. That was 15 minutes, right?
Sure.
15 minutes over.
I think we all
14 minutes and 39 seconds.
I think we all went exactly 15 minutes. That's why the episode is an hour and 15 minutes long.
So, right. Yes. Because I do new math.
That's how math works. Yes. So, all right. We are going to call that the end of the February episode of Behind the DM Screen. I want to thank Sam and Lauren for joining us. Sam, of course, people can find you. You are DM Samuel and RPG Musings. Lauren is at Obo Lauren. And where else do you want to send people to find you?
Beyond. Come hang out on our Discord and our forums. That's where I spend a lot of my time when I'm not in a Twitch chat somewhere. But yeah, as far as on the social medias, Twitter is the best way. Obo Lauren is the best way to get in touch with me because I find one thing I like and I focus on it, and that's my one.
And you talked about your Dungeon Drunks game. Where can people find that?
If you go to dungeondrunks.com, you can forever find podcasts are sold.
There you go.
We come out every Monday, and do not be scared of the fact that we do have 200 episodes. Start with the most. Yeah, there's a lot. We've been going for a while. But we do have distinct adventures in that ongoing campaign, and I do a recap at the beginning of every single episode. So us, and also as someone who does a lot of suggesting to other people to watch certain D&D shows or listen to podcasts, when Critical Role comes up, when any of the shows that I recommend that people go, that's a lot of hours, I go, just start with the most recent episode. Be okay with being a little bit lost. See if you like the characters, see if you like the way the group interacts, and if you do, just continue on from there. So if you jump in on episode 200 or episode 201 or whatever you jump in on, if you like us, stick around, and if not, I have many other suggestions for you. Come find me on Obo Lauren, and I'll let you know.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody, both in the Twitch and our guests. Thanks for filling in for Mike. It was definitely an upgrade. Ha ha ha, Mike.
It was we joke about Mr. Shea and everything, but I do have a lot of respect for him, and I hope we get a chance to of you fine folk, and then I can also show up and make the show 15 minutes longer.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right, so that's the end of the episode, and say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
All right.
I like that we both did that. We both immediately were like, bye, guys.
That's right.
Well, Mike and Sam have been doing it forever. So